Hello, my name's Anna Hoghton and I'm the author of this book, which is called The Mask of Aribella, and it's a fantasy, but it's set in the real world. And today I'm going to talk to you about how you can write magical settings. So there's different ways of doing so. So one is that you write a completely magical setting. So even from the very first word, we're not in our world, we're somewhere very, very different. Or you can write this sort of like portal fantasy where you start in the real world and then, like Alice in Wonderland, you sort of fall down that rabbit hole and end up in a very different one altogether, and then you might come back at the end. Hopefully you'll come back at the end. Or there's my version of a magical world, which is where you have the real world and then you have a magical world, and they're sort of running parallel together. So there's sort of the magical world is hidden inside the real world. And all three are wonderful, but my favourite is the magical world hidden inside the real world. And that's what I've written with this book. So it's set in an old version of Venice. So Venice is a place in Italy. It's very famous because it's very beautiful. It's also very strange. So they have these canals instead of streets, and people travel in boats instead of cars, and particularly in this kind of boat on the front cover, which is a gondola, a very famous, very typical Venetian boat. And Venice is also very, very famous for masks. And I don't know if you can see the mask in my front cover, but it's very clever. Can you see it? See the eyes? Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Very good design. I didn't do it. It's Paolo Escobar, so she was fantastic. So masks. So you instantly have in this place a kind of secretive and intriguing past, and I just was blown away by how magical I felt the place was already. And I thought, what if there was this kind of magical world running parallel to it? So I thought, well, maybe I'll create it. And that's what I've done in this story. So we have the real Venice, but we also have this main character called Arabella, who thinks she's normal, ordinary, average girl, but then one day sparks shoot from her fingers. And at first she's very, very afraid of this until she is picked up by this masked stranger who tells her the secret of being a misfit is that you're never the only one, and introduces her to the world of the Canovacci, who are the people with powers in my story. And their world exists alongside this real world of Venice. So all the real world things I've used as inspiration and as tools to advance my story. So, for example, I did a lot of research after going to Venice. So I went to Venice, but you don't actually have to go to the place. And, for your own magical setting, it might not be a city. It might be, underwater. It might be a different planet. I don't know. But you can do research. You don't have to, obviously, well, if you can get to Mars, I'll be very, very impressed. But you're not expected to. That's the wonderful thing about writing, is we can imagine it and create it. So three excellent resources at your disposal. The first one is libraries. So I went to library before, and this isn't even all the books I got. Lots of them are hidden at my parents' house, but these were some of the books that I would pick up. And there's also the internet, so you can do a lot of research on there. You can even walk on Google Street Maps around your setting if you need to see what it's like, if you need those real details. Obviously, if you're writing about, being underwater, you might not be able to walk around there, but you can imagine, maybe watch some videos. And number three, your imagination. So not everything needs to be 100% accurate, and that's a wonderful thing about magical settings as opposed to real settings, is you can be creative. And you can make some rules, your own rules. And actually, this is a very important factor that we'll come back to, because rules, I'm sorry to say, are very important even in these kind of magical fantasies, actually, especially in these magical fantasies, because readers need them to hold on to, and that's how you make your setting feel convincing and real, even when it's completely not. So that's the secret, really, of doing so. So that's how I did it. So I used a lot of very real things in Venice to root my reader and hold up, so they could hold on to them and give credibility to my story. So Venice used to be ruled by a Doge, kind of this guy in the front in his very fetching hat. So this was actually a crown, obviously not quite as dazzling as the Queen's crown now, but this was the crown they used to wear. And the Doge ruled Venice, and he ruled it in a very secretive way, because he had this kind of council of 10, and they would sometimes just grab people off the street and take them into these torture chambers, and it was all very hush-hush, and they didn't really tell people what was going on. So that was a fantastic device for me to use in my story, because I thought, hang on, maybe there's some other reason why there's such a secrecy around the Doge and around Venice. So they had these, you can see there, so these are actually slots in the palace wall. And this one does look quite like a lion, this one doesn't, but you're going to have to, they said it was the lion's mouth, so you're going to have to believe them. And underneath it says, for secret denunciation. So it's basically for people who thought that other people were up to no good, or else just really didn't like them and wanted to get them into trouble. So they would put their name on a piece of paper and put it through these mouths, which are like little slots like a letterbox, and the Doge and his council would get the names, and then that person might disappear, and they might end up in the palace torture chambers. Or in the prisons, so it's the torture chambers. So the palace was very beautiful. It had this kind of amazing decoration, but it also had, this palace prison and these torture chambers right on the other side. So it was, quite a mixed bag. And I think that's what I found so exciting and interesting about Venice as a place, and what inspired my story, is that it's beautiful, but it's also a bit frightening actually, and a bit scary, and a bit kind of, there's a bit mysterious. So yeah, I used that in my story, but I changed why it was there. And I think that is a really cool way of creating magical settings. So asking yourself why, but changing the answer. So mysteries and things we don't know are fantastic places to start writing from. So, why is the sea blue, for example? There's a very complicated scientific reason, but you could create another reason. Whys only go so far with answers that actually we can answer. So why do we have colours? Why are there only a certain number of colours? Are there any colours that exist that we don't know about? If you start letting your brain do all those things that people your age do so wonderfully and that adults completely forget how to do, that is your superpower, and that's what's going to make you write fantastic stories. So that's great, but the really important thing, that's a bit boring but actually can be quite exciting as well, is that you do need rules in your magical setting. So you can let your imagination run riot at the beginning, and it's very important too. You have to think of original creative ideas, but then after you've done that, after you've come up with, so I've come up with my character who can shoot magical flames from her fingers, and she's about to meet all these other magical people who live in Venice in this magical hotel. I won't tell you too much more in case of spoilers. Then you need some rules, because the thing about magic is, if it was just ruleless, then you've got no story, because story is all about conflict. And if your character can just make anything happen at any time without any consequences, then there's not really much story there, is there? Because, if there's a problem, they'll just snap their fingers and fix it. You need things that hold them back. Limitations, restrictions are fantastic, and they make really good plot. So, for example, the first time Arabella learns about the Canovaci masks, which in my book have kind of their own magical powers and properties, actually quite a few of them, which she finds out in due course. But the first time she actually learns about the mask is with Rodolfo, and the first thing she learns that it can do is make you unwatchable. And I like the idea of being unwatchable rather than invisible, because I thought it was a bit more original and quite an interesting idea about how you can kind of slip past unnoticed as opposed to kind of be just completely unseen. So here we go. So she says, "But won't they see us here?" she asked. "Oh, don't worry about that." Rodolfo tapped his starry mask. "My mask makes us unwatchable when necessary." "It makes us what?" "Unwatchable," Rodolfo replied, a little impatiently, "but not unhearable, so please, shh." So you see that in 2 lines, we've got a very clear understanding of what it can do, which is this magical thing of making the character who is wearing it unwatchable, but what its limitation is. So they're not unhearable. So if you're making a racket, people are still going to know you're there, and you're going to not be able to go past undetected. So those limitations are very important. It's very important also that you do have rules, but that you integrate them in a way that's showing the reader rather than telling the reader everything. So I do actually have a bit in my book where there are some rules written out, and that's when Arabella gets to this magical hotel. So here are my rules. "Greetings, novice. Welcome to the halfway hotel for the secret society of the Canovacci, protectors of Venice. We kindly ask that you observe these house rules to ensure a safe and peaceful stay for all. Failure to comply may be punishable by seizure of a guest's mask and checkout from the hotel. Number 1, powers must be declared at check-in. Number 2, novices must not use their power without training or permission. Rule number 3, gondolas may only be used with their owner's permission. Novices may not use gondolas. Number 4, no animals other than the authorized companions of elders may enter the hotel. And finally, rule number 5, secrets of the Canovacci must not be shared with imbeciles, excepting blood relatives and the Doge of Venice. We hope that you enjoy your stay at the halfway hotel, the elders of the Canovacci." Now, so I've got a list of rules there, and I bet you have a lot of questions after hearing all those strange terms and those strange rules. But you're not alone. Arabella also has the same questions. And what is quite beneficial in your new world is to have a character who doesn't understand the world, and it's even more beneficial if they are the protagonist, because then the reader is understanding this world at the same time as the protagonist. And those rules, it's not a long list of rules there. It's short enough, and it's got intrigue in it. So you want to keep on reading because you want to find out what they mean, rather than, no one wants to just read the rule book. We only want to know the rules that we need to know at that time to get further in the game or book or whatever it is that we're doing. So you have to be careful about how you introduce your rules, but you do need rules, and that is the secret to magic. You can have magical setting and it can be fantastic and wonderful as you want, but the rules are going to be what makes it believable for your reader and what makes your world feel credible, and ultimately what creates a great story. So I want you to come up with your own settings. I want to see how helpful you have found this session. So I want you to come up with your own magical settings. So think about all those normal useful things that we think about with setting, which are using our senses. So what can we see, what can we hear, what can we smell and taste and feel. But think also about what makes your setting magical and amazing, but also what are the rules, so what are the limitations of your world. And think about how you can communicate those rules to your reader without kind of just telling them every single rule, but doing it in quite a clever way or an intriguing way. And you don't have to give us all the rules on the first page. I appreciate that, this world might be incredibly complicated, and you might just want to put 1 or 2, which you can reveal in an interesting and relevant way to the action. And I want you to write a sheet of A4 on this, and I want you to enter by emailing them to me. My email address will be somewhere close by to this video. You'll find it somewhere, or you can find it on my website. And then the winner, I'm gonna give a £20 book voucher to Mr. B's, which is a wonderful independent bookshop in Bath. So I'm so excited to see what magical world you create, whether it's a completely magical world or it's that parallel world like in the Mask of Aribella, where you've got a real place and a magical place living side by side, or if it's one of those kind of Alice in Wonderland stories where you go through some sort of portal to get into that magical world. Whatever it is, I can't wait to read your stories, and I hope that you found this session helpful and enjoy the rest of Storytale Festival. I am so pleased that they've managed to get a virtual version going online, because it's such a wonderful festival and I am absolutely honoured to be part of it. So it's been a complete pleasure, and do get in touch with your stories and enjoy the rest of it. Goodbye.